Hello, everyone. My name is Marina Laurent. I'm from the United Nations Department of Political Peacebuilding Affairs. I'm very happy to be here with you. I see some faces here that organizers and participants. I hope that we'll be able to have an interesting and fruitful conversation. So today we will be talking about fostering peace in Northeast Asia with the youth-led initiative for the regional cooperation. And today I have with me two peace builders, amazing two peace builders, and they are also authors of a United Nations initiative for peace and security in Northeast Asia. So first of all, Oyundalai Othu, I will call her today Oyuka shortly. As I mentioned, she's the author of the regional initiative for the United Nations. So since the beginning of the program, she attended a number of events, including the 18th Internet Government Forum in Kyoto. She provided very important inputs for our initiative and provided recommendations for peace and security in Northeast Asia. Currently, she's involved in the National Internet Governance Forum in Mongolia to address internet-related issues. Previously, she worked for a think tank and analyzed political ideologies, public policy, and human rights-related issues. And nowadays, she's a young an emerging evaluator and a member of the Mongolian Evaluation Association, Oyuka. And the second peace builder, Kit Hoi Lee, I will call him today Jerry. So Jerry is a PhD student at the University of Sydney, and he's a graduate lawyer. He has a degree from Harvard University. So his research focuses on socio-cultural citizenship, specifically redefining traditional concept of citizenship. So he's also author of Northeast Asia Project for Peace and Security and Digital Literacy. And recently he founded a Chat It Forward. This is a charity-designed initiative for students, alumni, or staff in Australia. So welcome, this is Jerry. And as I mentioned, today we'll speak about youth, peace and security, and also digital literacy. This topic is extremely important, especially because this September, the Secretary General of the United Nations will talk about the Global Digital Compact, and we hope that this digital compact will be adopted by the members of the United Nations. So this digital compact is expected to outline shared principles for an open, free, secure digital future for all. So within this concept, today we'll talk about digital security in Northeast Asia, and we'll talk also about the project that I mentioned before, Future in Peace in Northeast Asia, which is co-designed with peace building from 5 Northeast Asian countries: China, Japan, Mongolia, and the Republic of Korea. So I will give the floor to our peace builder to talk maybe more about the project, and also we will continue talking about the review of existing policies on the digital literacy in Northeast Asia. Jerry will talk about digital literacy programs, about the digital literacy program in Australia, China, Japan, and Oyuka will continue on Mongolia, China, and Korea. And then we will also discuss the private companies' digital literacy programs, and we will discuss the lessons learned. So a lot of interesting topics, and now I will give the floor to Jerry and Oyuka.
Please, can you give us the presentation? Oh. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for the great introduction of our project. And today I will give you a project allocation and now I wanna share with you the featuring FEAST project in Northeast Asia, and we will look into digital literacy program, which is actually part of our policy recommendation. And also we will consider the review of the public and private digital literacy program, and also we will analyze how to observe the best practices and best cases in our regional digital literacy program. And after that, we will Q&A and discussion. Yeah, actually, this project is still ongoing, and I was as a youth peace builder and young researcher at this project. And this project actually started in 2021 and implemented in partnership with UNESCO and focused on building capabilities for digital facilitation and utilizing future literacy methodology, considering the specific regional context. And during a series of virtual dialogues and over the 40 youth peace builders from Northeast Asia such as Mongolia, Korea, and Japan and China, and we imagined scenarios set in 2040 and imagining how digital literacy, education, new technologies, and innovative approaches could strengthen cross-border ties. And actually, the first phase of the project was virtual dialogue. I was one of the participants of this virtual dialogue, and the second phase of this project, and the initiative was implemented in collaboration with Swiss foreign policy think tank, which is called FORUS, and co-designed and co-facilitated by the Northeast Asian youth. And we held four workshops in online, not in person. And youth peace builders used strategic foresight tools to develop concrete policy recommendations for policymakers and exploring pathways to a feasible future to the region. And in the second phase of this project, questions were just framed using futurist triangle approach, which is the very unique and interesting approach for youths, and probing participants think about the future's outcomes by looking 3 dimensions. And for example, push of the present, the pull from the future, and the wait fast. And through collective scenario building and testing, we identified 4 key policy recommendations, avenues, and which is including establishing digital literacy program that is today we are discussing now, and featuring educational and technological cooperation, and also creating a regional youth parliament. This initiative is also just kicked off the actionable plan in Mongolia, and because these authors from Mongolia of this recommendation, and also the last one is fostering inclusive metaverse. And for example, last October, I participated in international conference in Kyoto, just discuss about the inclusive metaverse and how we engage this inclusive and equitable metaverse environment, especially youth is so power to change the world, and also actionable activities. And also phase 3 is still ongoing in this project, and the project focused on policy bridging and supporting youth voices at relevant regional policy fora through events. For example, we participated in a series of events in China, Korea, and Mongolia. It was the regional and international event. And for example, youths of this policy recommendations, and we participated in regional and international events to discuss our policy recommendations and connect with the policy makers and NGOs and academia and something like that. Yeah, that was our project's policy projects and 3 stages. And now I would like to invite Jerry, who is one of the author of this policy recommendation, especially. He focused on the digital literacy proposal. Yeah.
Thank you, Oyuka. So we have on the screen here on the left-hand side the cover page of the policy proposal. And it was a project that followed after the foresight methodology and digital surveys that Oyuka mentioned. And from these surveys and utilizing foresight methodology, where we asked peace builders and youth in the region to think about the future they wanted and forecast priorities and concerns, we gathered that a growing concern in the region pertained to digital literacy, and particularly as it pertained to online spaces. So beyond the question of technology for use, for good or bad, was whether online spaces could be inclusive. And we realized more and more that while online spaces had a lot of potential in offering interconnectivity, there was more demographics that were being left out. So demographics that not only had the lack of access to emerging technologies, but also continuing education. So how to effectively engage online with more and more avenues for access. And so as the session today really does focus on inclusivity and intersectionality, we wanted to emphasize how the background for this specific proposal was a lot of these considerations. And we wanted to go a step further. So beyond engaging and including more marginalized voices is kind of shifting the dialogue a little bit. So the terms and concepts discussed online and in conversations, and how these concepts could be living concepts. So what I mean by that is that these concepts can change, and conversation is part of the redefinition of things discussed. And we'll discuss this a little bit more when we present a little bit about hate speech as a case study to how we can have a digital literacy program that does incorporate such changes. And so moving on, on the right-hand side are 3 key aspects of our digital literacy policy proposal. So Manjung and I, she was a co-author and she's not here today, we came up with these 3 aspects because we thought these were key differences that future digital literacy programs could incorporate. So number 1 being cross-sector collaboration. So acknowledging the benefits of public organization and the reach they have across several demographics, along with private sectors which have more resources and access to upcoming technologies. Second is to really understand the importance of diplomacy and regional identity. So understanding that diplomacy and engaging in diplomatic conversations requires a level of understanding of stakeholders. As online spaces become more representative of demographics, easing that link between the off-screen and on-screen allows us to look at online spaces with more accuracy so that we have a better understanding of stakeholders. And so this leads to the third aspect of substance beyond access. So teaching technological skills that are beyond the question of how to use technologies, but skills like information analysis and critical thinking, and being aware of some hot topic issues like misinformation and disinformation. So before we go into the analytical presentation of this session, where we'll present a little bit about digital literacy programs that we've reviewed so that we understand a little bit about how we can incorporate such in our own digital literacy program. As a youth-led initiative, there are a few questions that we are always faced with as we shop around this proposal to other conferences, and they are the ones that are displayed on the screen. And so the main one we always get is, how feasible is this proposal? And half of the time where we get asked this question, it is genuine concern about the practicality of this project. But for anyone who knows about or is part of a youth-led project will also know that this question is often undertoned by skepticism skepticism towards youth projects and whether it is credible and who are supporters. And so part of our analysis today does really think about this question. And but I do want to acknowledge that without the support of UN professionals like Marina here and Linda and Sonia and Minji, this project would not have been possible. And they really helped us kind of hone in on our interests today. But how we have incorporated this question in our own analysis is that we are aware of the limits of our presentation, and we're not trying to reinvent digital literacy programs. We fully acknowledge that these programs are plentiful. Almost every nation in the world has some form of digital literacy program. Almost every technological company in this world also has a digital literacy program. But we acknowledge that the room for improvement lies in the changes that can be made, and why the utilization rates of digital literacy programs, as plentiful as they are just extremely low. So this moves on to our second question that we're always faced. So what exactly are our next steps? So further down the line, we will draft a digital literacy program and recommend changes to existing ones. But part of this process that we will share some of it today are the analytical steps that we have taken. So it wouldn't make sense to draft a program without understanding what is out there. So we'll note a few existing structures and nuances that are in public and private digital literacy programs. And the last question pertains to one that we get asked in usually public government forums is, will governments be interested? And we believe there is a strong public and private incentive to incorporating a better digital literacy program. So we can understand that digitization offers great benefits for governments in easing administration problems and also just having a faster and growing economy. Private companies as well are incentivized because they have a growing customer base that can use their technologies as well. So going on to our review of digital literacy programs. So we have 6 programs on the screen right now. I'll be presenting on the top row, the first 3, and Oyuku will present on the bottom 3. And so I understand that Australian government is a little bit of an outlier, is not being part of the region, but I wanted to include a point of analysis so we could compare it to regional focused ones. So the Australian government initiatives are usually tied to specific demographics, and the one I've included here is focused towards older Australians. And so the goal was to improve digital knowledge amongst older Australians, and what are a few standout features of this program was that they had digital mentors. So they had volunteers who wanted to impart technical skills to this demographic. And this was very different from other existing programs who usually tasked existing educators and just made sure and provided them with some resources to teach technology. In this case, we had people who had the skills already and who wanted to. And an offshoot benefit of this program was that specific skills that faced the elderly population in Australia, which included online scams and feeling lonely, there were 2 issues that were prevalent in the older Australians, but were appeased by this program. So we had increased social connectivity amongst that demographic, as well as less scams that happened as well. Standard across most of these digital literacy programs on areas of improvement were the lack of diversity considerations, and again, skills that were more long-lasting, such as more critical thinking and informational analysis skills. Moving on to the Hong Kong-China digital strategy. So I included 2 digital strategies on the screen here. So the general digital strategy was a blueprint of the information communication technology space within schools. This looked pretty standard, and it included improved access to Wi-Fi and broadband and a few targeted programs towards specific demographics. So incorporating this in public spaces for those who weren't in school environments, and that was some of the considerations. The Future Hong Kong 2030 had a more extensive overview of funding towards technological programs. However, again, a drawback of that overview was that there was a lot of projects stuck in the ideation phase. So we knew that millions of dollars were going to certain research centers, but we didn't know what those projects were or what the details of the projects were even. So that was a drawback on that front. Japan's program focused on digitization in schools, and a lot of it talked about what they coined as Society 5.0, which was the incorporation of new technologies such as AI and cyberspace. So in schools, what that looked like was providing devices and trying to use them beyond gaming and communication. So how do they develop a research topic, and how do they incorporate AI into the everyday learning environment? They also had similar program to Australia in that the ICT supporter scheme invited private expert professionals from certain companies to teach those technologies within school spaces. And so moving on to the next three programs that Yuka will present on.
Okay, thank you, Jerry. Okay, let's start with the Mongolian government's digital literacy program. In Mongolia, we have a ministry, and related to the digital literacy program, I think it is the base case, especially in Northeast Asia. And the Ministry of Digital Development and Communication just adopted the plans for promote the digital literacy program for all citizens, especially in Mongolia. And in this regard, one of the activities is e-Academy, which has the Department of the Digital Literacy program, it is the quite unique experience in our nation. And just last month, the E-Mongolia Academy just kicked off the national campaign to promote digital literacy skills for youths and older citizens, and especially and even teachers. And the campaign is still ongoing. And in Mongolia, outside of the government, some international organizations just initiated the program and actions to promote digital literacy skills. And for example, UNDPA in Mongolia just initiated the Accelerator Lab, which is called Accelerator Lab, which is aimed to strengthening communities across Mongolia and also across the national NGOs and to promote digital literacy competence. And they conducted their research, which is the quite unique experience in our nation. The last year they conducted their research, qualitative assessment of digital access and the skills of vulnerable groups, which is quite unique research in our nation because it was the first initiative in Mongolia. So some kind of decision makers so appreciate this kind of initiative, and also based on this assessment, they analyzed their internet access, Mongolians' internet access, and proficiency with digital technologies, and using just the European Union digital competence framework for citizens. And the assessment covered 5 key dimensions of digital skills. And for example, information and data literacy, and communication and collaboration, and digital content creation, and safety, and problem solving. And it was quite interesting for youths, and because the research was the research findings was so interesting and so insightful for us. And based on this qualitative assessment, the UNDP initiated the digital literacy program. They adopted the Microsoft's digital literacy program because they decided that Microsoft's digital literacy program is more systematic and comprehensive and complemented by video content, and they translated it into Mongolian. In Mongolian, we say "Ta zahim cho an," which can be translated as "Would you go digital?", which is the open platform for all people, especially elders and youths, and everyone who wants to improve their digital literacy. They can connect the kind of platform, and they can watch the video, and they can access the public digital literacy information. And so let's move to the China's digital literacy program. And in China, China has recently launched an action plan to enhance digital literacy and skills, a collaborative strategy designed to yield results across the nation by end of the 2024. The action sets a broad framework and aiming to create more comprehensive and digital literacy and skill development system. And it outlines 6 key areas with 17 major tasks aimed to advancing digital proficiency across the nation, across the China's region. And the key areas of the plan include cultivating high-level digital talent, promoting digital literacy among leaders and public servants, fostering digital competence in schools, and ensuring that all citizens have equal access to digital resources, and thereby reducing the digital division. And I think, it is based on some kind of resources. They highlighted that this China's initiative has a goal to boost digital economy in the nation, and so it is inalienable part of this nation, part of this China, which is very quite a sector in digital literacy. So. Last country will be Korea. So the Korean government just initiated the quite unique action and plan, and which is called K Digital Platform. You can see the screen, K Digital Platform, which is the open platform where all training in the field of digital convergence is conducted, and all the resources can be used by various members and the regions to carry out projects centered on the idea, sharing, and problem solving. And there are 2 main functions of this K Digital platform, and one of is hub of digital training. They can share the unique ideas, and prospective ideas can share the others. And second thing is sharing and opening of digital infrastructure. And by performing these 2 key functions, and the purpose of the K Digital Platform project is enhance the digital capabilities of the entire nation and support the digital transportation of industry. And it is quite well known across Korea. This initiative first introduced in 2021 and has gradually expanded, and currently is being operated in 2 locations throughout the country. And considering the areas and fields of deployment, the number of platforms will be increased by 60 by 2026. And so, looking at these 3 countries, and I have a little conclusion. And these initiatives provide a structured framework for enhancing digital skills across various demographics, promoting inclusivity and supporting digital transformation in industries. And China's action plan emphasizes nationwide digital competence, and while South Korea's K Digital Literacy Program convergence and innovation through the regional hub. And so it is quite actionable policy from government. And so let's move to the private companies' digital literacy program. And now I will share the Samsung and Microsoft's digital literacy policy. You know, the Samsung is very popular around the world, and Samsung Electronics has been running its Samsung Smart School program. Samsung Smart School program. It is so interesting and so unique program around the world, just providing devices and software to elementary school students as a part of its corporate social responsibility and activities to boost digital literacy. It's just not regional action, it's just a global action. The branch of the Samsung just initiated the Smart School program. the Smart School initiative, which was just started in 2012, just bridges the digital education gap and improves the future capabilities of teenagers by providing its devices and educational content and training in schools that have relatively poor education environment. So far, and this initiative has supported over 300 schools that have allowed well over 1.4 million bright young minds to learn in more fun and interactive environments. As this is the case with Samsung's teaching institutes and other educational enriching initiatives, the ultimate goal of this Smart School program is to level the playing field to help students in these communities thrive in the digital area. And last one is Microsoft's digital literacy program. And so Microsoft's digital literacy is for anyone with the basic reading skills who want to learn the fundamentals of using digital technologies. And Microsoft's just offering the online courses on YouTube. We can access the kind of digital literacy courses from YouTube and other social media channels. And for examples, they are providing some kind of courses. For example, they have work with computers, access to information online, and communicate online, create digital content, and something like that. They just open the platform to who can access to this platform. So this is just open platform. Just upload. Everyone can watch these videos who want to learn the digital literacy and want to improve their digital literacy. So, little conclusion of this private digital literacy. And so, Samsung's Smart School initiative and Microsoft's digital literacy program are pivotal in enhancing digital literacy. It's very great, interesting, and action region and across the globe. Across the region and the globe. The Samsung's program, which is, as I mentioned before, since 2012, has provided devices and educational content over the 3,000 schools, benefiting 1.4 million students, particularly in underserved areas. Microsoft's program offers fundamental digital skills through a structured curriculum and ensuring accessibility for all learners. And actually, both initiatives significantly contribute to bridging the digital divide and preparing individuals for the digital access. And the COVID-19 pandemic was unprecedented. It was just accelerated the digital literacy program, especially Samsung and Microsoft, because of the spread of the COVID-19 pandemic, and Microsoft and Samsung created more hubs in the regional area and around the world because during the COVID-19 pandemic, as we know, to access the better education was so hard. In my personally, I really appreciate the kind of initiative. Okay, let's move to another hate speech. Jerry will continue this.
Before we move on, so just to cover the other two private digital literacy programs on the screen as well. So we have the one from Google's digital literacy program, the Applied Digital Skills Curriculum. And Google's curriculum was pretty wide-reaching. So it covered a lot of job-specific skills, so that ranged from email access and how to create spreadsheets, along with further professional activities, so how to research and develop a topic. A limit towards Google's digital literacy program, which again was pretty common with some of the other private company-based ones, was how it was all tied to Google-specific tools. And as we understand across regions, there are varying different priorities and also popularities of this research engines. And and tools, the digital literacy program was quite limited in this regard. And moving on to Facebook/Meta's digital literacy program. So we have the We Think Digital program as well as the My Digital World. And both of these programs included digital foundations and digital well-being. So well-being pertaining to resilience online and health as we interact more in online spaces. So two very, very important substantive aspects of technological literacy. And a fallback of Facebook/Meta's digital literacy program, again, was the specific tools that Meta provided, but also in general, a black and white approach to digital literacy programs, which we'll discuss a little bit more as we do a case study on what we suggest and how we could distill some of this analysis. So when I refer to black and white approach, it means that when we have a module or we have a skill that we're presenting to users, there's and often a tendency to tell them what is right and what is wrong. So how to use the internet in a very specific way. And our digital literacy program, as we mentioned a little bit before, wants to foster a more independently led approach where people can make the decision for themselves on how to engage in conversations online. And so moving forward, we have a little bit of a case study that we want to present on the concept of hate speech. So the definitions of hate speech legally and internationally are known and pretty standard. And I've included on the screen here on the left-hand side the UN's definition of hate speech that is part of the strategy and plan of action. And so the middle column is the Rabat plan of action, and we can see here a little bit of the variability of its definition and how there are considerations of context and form, and also considerations of the parties involved. And on the right-hand side, I've included are some of the issues that are tied to hate speech. So disinformation, misinformation. So misinformation as information that is wrong, and disinformation as weaponized misinformation. And so noting these variabilities and this framework, the incorporation of our proposal looks like this. So from the very right-hand side the left-hand side, cross-sector collaboration, is that we can acknowledge the standard definitions that exist in the status quo amongst regions, but then we can also understand the variability and the context-specific factors. So a digital literacy program can consider these and introduce such a framework where people can still discuss what constitutes hate speech. They can engage in this definition, and regions can define for themselves what this really means and looks like online. This is more of an inclusive and user bottom-up based approach of how we define existing hot topics and terms. Regarding regional identity in the second category, we have unintentional products where we feel like people are more empowered, and instead of feeling like they're wading into spaces with preset boundaries on what the conversations are on, or what they're allowed to discuss, or how to discuss disagreement. There's more power to the user to engage and to feel like they could be part of the redefinition of ongoing policies. On the right-hand side is of substance beyond access. So part of this kind of expectation of users is to provide the tools for information access and critical thinking. And this includes kind of understanding the use of online spaces in diplomacy, but also in the everyday. So we often forget, while we're increasingly online, the importance in everyday conversations of listening to disagreements, being able to engage in tough conversations. And as we are brought into the online space, where there seems to be more of these conversations ongoing and more stakeholders that we're faced with as well, digital literacy programs need to cater for these changes, but also place an emphasis that those skills that we learn in person are just as important online. So with such an understanding, our further steps kind of are, well, to recap a little bit firstly on our presentation and to distill the analysis that we have learned. So we can note that firstly, there's a lot of digital literacy programs out there. Number two, there are a lot of overlaps. The digital literacy programs have a lot of benefits and detriments, and a lot of them repeat throughout all of the programs as well. Thirdly is that despite the amount of digital literacy programs, we have low utilization rates. So even though private companies have so much access to demographics, we don't have a lot of people looking up Google's digital literacy program and learning how to write an email or a spreadsheet from that specific program. And we don't have a lot of people who will search for a government-specific program as well and learn technological skills from there. So with these pervading issues in mind, what our approach is to kind of distill these issues and present the set of skills that could really aid usership and increase appeal of digital literacy programs. And part of that really means shifting the mindset a little bit. So instead of focusing on black and white approaches on what is the right way to use the internet, and what is the wrong way to use the internet, but to think about variability and frameworks of minds that we can foster. And so moving forward here, we started off in 2022 with a policy publication where we presented and shopped around in different conferences to hear feedback on what we could do better. This continued in 2023, and in 2024, we're incorporating more of this analysis, so to understand what are things that we need to address as we further engage in drafting processes and start to ideate with hopefully other professionals and academics. What are certain things that we need to consider? And in 2025 is that we hope we get more concrete presentation of the concepts and terms that we would like to discuss. So as we've presented today about hate speech, is that we want to introduce a framework that really is bottom up. So instead of being told what hate speech means and what the legal definition is, what do people on the ground think it is? How can they engage in the conversation so they can learn more about it themselves? And we're not in the business of telling people that that learning process is wrong or right. They could be presented, of course, with the existing status quo and the bounds of what it means, of course, but that conversation and that learning process is extremely important and is not something to be lost throughout the increasing digitization of societies. So I'll leave it at there, and we are very open to further questions as well. I understand that this was a lot of information. The public policy proposal is available online, so if anyone wants to read it, we'd be very glad to introduce more on that front as well.
Back to microphone. Thank you very much, Yuka and Jerry, for a very interesting presentation. We still have some time, and I was wondering, actually, I would like to have maybe an open discussion. I will ask a few questions to both of you, our peace leaders, I want to say that way. And also, it would be interesting to have a discussion with our audience. And thank you for comparing these digital literacy programs in different countries. Very insightful. I didn't know actually about all the details, and I believed in many countries there are other digital literacies. But as you mentioned, not everybody is using them. And I was wondering, maybe first I would like to ask a question to both of you. What are the main obstacles and barriers? Why? Because I was thinking about my family members, and last year we've been discussing a lot about artificial intelligence and ChatGPT, and when I talk to my mother, for example, she's not aware of all these new technologies and how to use it. At the same time, our world is advancing so fast, and so of course there are a lot of context, but maybe the first question to both of you: what are the main barriers of this implementation of these digital literacy programs, or how to? Yes, over to you. Do you want to?
Hello.
I don't know how to use this microphone.
Okay. Perfect. Hello. Okay, so I think this answer can be broken down into several responses. So obviously, I think the first layer is that of access. So demographics that don't even have access to technology and connectivity. So that could be Wi-Fi or a device. But then moving on from that into some of perhaps more familiar examples of like this fear of the unknown and this lack of desire to learn more about technology. And I can relate to that a lot. So for instance, in the law firm I work at, there is a fear of ChatGPT, even though the tech department within our law firm openly uses ChatGPT to kind of summarize information and to publish articles about the technological updates. And I think from there on, it's a question of people not knowing how to go about learning these tools and how reliable they could be. And it kind of speaks to some of the standout features I talked about in some specific digital literacy programs, where we had volunteers who wanted to teach about these new technologies. And because they had that desire, they were willing to break down the steps, step by step, and provide that education. I think there's a lot of fear of not knowing or admitting not knowing sometimes in professional settings as well. So I think breaking that down is a great feature to break that barrier. Next steps is, I think that there needs to be some sort of consolidation of these vast amounts of digital literacy programs and an acknowledgement that throwing funding towards a project just doesn't work. And more and more educators are getting involved in nations' digital literacy program because nations are realizing that there is this gap. So we're going to see, I think, a shift moving forward where there has to be some sort of simplification and a focus less on the ideation phase and more on the actual development phase of projects.
Okay. Thank you, Marina and Jerry. And I would like to consider the issue of rural area, and especially in the rural area, there has a lot of issues regarding of the digital literacy. For example, in my family, they are living in rural area, and they don't have digital literacy skills. In my siblings, in my parents, they are still learning in digital literacy, and they are going on the process to learn digital literacy. It is quite hard to implement in rural area. In this case, students in rural area don't have electronic devices, for example, at least in computers and smartphones, and it is quite hard to they access to digital literacy courses and contents. So first time it's quite important to create opportunity to access the digital literacy contents and channels. And in Mongolia we have a quite a low education system compared to the developed countries. So in rural area, we have still a lot of problems, especially in education. And for example, I come from rural area. I graduated in rural high schools, and after that I completed in city, which is Ulaanbaatar. I completed their university, and it was so hard. Still, I'm studying to getting a better education. So there are so many students just like me. They still facing to access the quality education, and for example, digital literacy. So we need to have to apply and have to implement in rural area. We need to consider, we need to take into account in vulnerability groups, for example, children and elders and people with disabilities. Yes.
Thank you very much. Very interesting. Ayuka previously shared some digital literacy programs in Korea. Actually, I don't know where is the audience from, but maybe there are some participants also from Korea, or actually many other countries. But my question maybe now will be to the audience. It would be very interesting to see and to hear from you, what are the entry points for the digital literacy? What are the stakeholders, from your opinion, should be? Because we heard from the private sector. Maybe there are others, and maybe you see on a daily basis. I don't know, maybe there is a think tank, maybe there are some volunteers that are helping with the digital literacy. As I mentioned, my mom doesn't know how to use the ChatGPT or artificial intelligence. And I was explaining that you can use it for everything. So maybe this question is to you. How do you do you feel some, maybe from the government there, Yuka mentioned the government program, but maybe you see other entry points, and maybe from your experience on maybe someone or somehow over to someone from the audience, that would be very interesting to hear.
Okay. Hi, my name is Aston. I'm from JG University. I think young generation is heavily rely on the smartphone for the entry. However, elderly, in terms of the old generation, they don't have enough access to build up their literacy, digital literacy, I mean. But I'm not sure whether it's good to build up digital literacy for such a young generation, especially if they are going kindergarten, or if they are participating just the earlier education. So my question is, Korea is kind of have a higher accessibility in terms of to build the digital literacy, but for young generation is not sufficient. That's what I see and observed. But my question is it really good to build up, digital literacy for young generation? Because these days we have so many false information, and then students are led by misinformation. So that's my question. Even though we have a higher accessibility, my question is whether it's good to build up digital literacy or not.
I think this question is to you guys.
Thank you. That's a really good question. And I'm not an expert in terms of children's psychologies, but I'll share a little anecdote about, and that kind of addresses the question. I have a friend, she's giving birth in August, and she was looking into a lot of the toys to buy young children. And one of them was this kind of little device where you can input these cards. And in the cards were stories, or stories from children books and whatnot. And I was looking into what some of the cards taught, and some of them pertain to critical thinking, and some of them were about emotions. Others were like numbers and counting. And so it makes me think that definitely parents have a lot of authority in determining when kids are interconnected into the web or Wi-Fi. But I believe that digital literacy skills can also border into information analysis and critical thinking. And that really can come in so many different forms. So for like a one-year-old child, that could just be listening to like some fairy tale story that teaches them how to be more attuned to information that they see, or emotions of how they feel, and to respond to that. And so there's so many levels and forms for this. And I would say that it is very important that we slowly start introducing this at early ages, just because we can see the grave issues that you mentioned as well that are tied to misinformation and disinformation, and the hotbed of ongoing controversial conversations, like how to even manage that and manage your emotions in that space. So yeah, not really answering with my own personal experience, but yes, that was what my friend's process was going through, and I was quite impressed that those cards had those skills as well.
Thank you for the question. And so I suppose that the children is mirror of their parents. So first we need to provide the knowledge and information for their parents. And the parents will give their children and will provide the information, for example, how to use your phone and computers, and when you should use your phone in the morning or evening. And they have mentioned that the parents have a lot of authority to for their children. And so that is what I am thinking, that we need to provide a holistic information, and by using a holistic approach to give the information for the parents, and I mean the adults. And adults have a very powerful in their family, so they need to give their information for their children and for their children's health and education. Yes. So that is why I am thinking that, because we do have a little have a little opportunity to reach the kindergartens and reach the little childrens, and so yeah.
Is there any other questions from the audience? Please.
Yes, thank you, and thank you both for a really interesting presentation on what I think is a very important topic. I actually had a couple of thoughts that I wanted to share that are slightly not necessarily questions, but more so comments. On the last point about children, I think that's a really interesting point in how it brings in the fact that a lot of digital literacy programs might end up being all about what people want. And so based on what you've told us, maybe the programs that governments have or even private companies have are more focused on supply, meaning what the government can do and on what private companies can do for society, when, as a matter of fact, we might be better off if we thought about what people actually wanted, which I'm sure you've already considered. Talking about children, you can't take cell phones away from children. They'll just go crazy. So it's not necessarily a matter of making them learn. But for elderly people, I'll give you an example from Korea, a somewhat of an issue is with the kiosks, the automated kiosks. And that's a digital literacy program issue. And so how do you make it so that the elderly that are frustrated with their experiences with these devices, how do you make them come to us or people like you who provide these services to help them? And I think that's one comment that I wanted to make. The other comment, something that again I'm sure that you've thought of, was the issue of urgency, because of how things have changed so fast. ChatGPT was, I think, unimaginable 5 years ago. Now we have it. Now everybody's using it. Who knows what's coming next? And so it really is something that's urgent. And the gap that we have today is only getting further and further away. So what I would personally like to see from your work would be pressing that urgency a bit more further, because that gap's only going to grow exponentially furthermore. And so those are my two comments. And then to add on a question, I was wondering, since your work is really regionally focused, this is actually a two-part question. One, did you find anything particular about digital use in Northeast Asia compared to other regions around the world, maybe North America or Europe, that you would like to share? And then secondly, in terms of your end goal, and so is your goal to have the 4 countries in Northeast Asia share best practices on digital literacy so that we can come up with something together, or is it so that we can come up with something that we can share as a community, a regional community? So I'm just wanted to hear your insights on that. Sorry for that long response.
No, we greatly appreciate it. And thank you so much for the comments and questions. They're all very, very important considerations. And I'd like to address some of the comments because, again, great points. So the first one pertaining to, I guess I want to address the elderly and their access to technology. And that is a grave concern in a lot of nations, particularly as it ties to kind of what I mentioned before. The lack of social connectedness kind of breeds loneliness amongst that population as well as the prevalency of online scams, and the elderly being very key victims. And in Australia, this is a huge issue because some of these scams are very advanced. You'll get a text that's saying you haven't paid your bill. You get a phone call that sounds very official, and there are a lot of people that fall in these scams. And what we've seen in the success of the Australian-specific program is the incorporation of the program in public spaces that would be frequented by the elderly Australians. So what this looked like was the local libraries, or specifically in aged cared homes, and just having more outreach and willing volunteers made a huge significance. And I can't emphasize enough how, when I was reading through the programs, that having someone who wanted to teach elderly Australians made such a difference because they were just more patient and they knew how to also deal with people who are more vulnerable. And having that catered program was really important in that regard. And regarding the comment about people's desires, I think that's really, really important. And that's where the UN structure of incorporating foresight methodology and digital surveys amongst youth in the region kind of spoke to our proposal, where this proposal resulted from a lot of youth in the region being concerned. And they were concerned about going in online spaces and feeling either emotionally tired about what was going on and not knowing how to engage in these conversations, how to give back and participate. And in forecasting this as becoming more of an issue as there's more technologies and more issues that we become aware of outside of our regions and beyond, knowing how to deal with that. And so digital literacy really goes into how this could be mitigated and that youth priorities and youth desires in this manner can also be addressed. And even though this program kind of grew from that basis, it really could apply to other demographics as well, because we don't just have youth online, and we all get older. 3 years ago is a different age as well. So this really applies across the board. Regarding the question, so in terms of urgency and the next steps, I'm trying to remember the question a little bit. But yes, with urgency, the divide that you point to is what is a grave concern, and why why so many nations are trying to come up with this program. And we see within our region specific reasons why that divide has existed. So just to use China as an example, so during COVID, there was a digitization of payment. And so the whole population was basically forced to download these apps, learn how to use these apps, and learn these procedures. There was no alternative. They basically phased out cash. And if you tried to use cash, they wouldn't have change on hand. So there was also an incentive to keep up and not be behind in this digitization process. So each country has micro examples where this happens, where the population is basically forced to learn certain aspects and certain steps in technology. And I'm not saying this is the best approach, but when we talk about regional differences and how governments have approached it, we can see this tied to specific policies. And so digital literacy programs and our proposal at the very end will have to cater towards the variability that we acknowledge already. So the different paces amongst different demographics within different sectors. I know there's so many areas and factors to consider, but that means that in our own digital literacy program, we'll have to review and suggest changes that cater and speak to these aspects. And that is why when we move further in our digital literacy proposal, and I wish Manjung was here to speak more about our next steps as well, because we're thinking about, in our suggestions and amendments, about skills where people have that choice, where they could build up, and so that when there are new technologies, there's also an incentive for them to learn and incentive to want to get involved. And that is kind of what we're lacking here. There's still a lot of fear of the new, a hesitancy of the new, and that's a huge problem within programs, and programs should address that as well. How do we foster this desire to keep up and to also try new things and incorporate new things in one's life as well? And seeing the viability of technology in that way, even though we always talk about what technology can be used for in terms of the benefits and the good, is packaging it a different way. And programs will have to do that as well. And so regionally, there will be focuses of this type as well. Yeah. Sorry, that was kind of a long-winded, just thinking on the spot. Yeah.
Thank you for the question, Jerry. And I would like to aid in some points. And digital literacy skills for elders, and it is huge issues in regional, not only regional, around the world. For example, in Mongolia, as I mentioned in my presentation, and international organizations in Mongolia, for example, UNDFA in Mongolia just initiated the program, which is to support the digital literacy or vulnerable groups, which is included elder people. And so they conducted the research, and for example, elders, what kind of digital skills they have now, and what kind of digital skills they want to study and want to learn. And the first step was identified their desire and their need. And second step was to supply the specific knowledge and using the holistic approach and capacity building and training and campaign and meeting, open meeting, and yeah, that was quite helpful for them. For example, in their report, they organized over the 20 capacity building in urban and rural area. They meet in person with elders and discuss them, and they used the holistic approach, which is included to support the family capacity building. For example, to provide the holistic, to provide the very comprehensive digital skills. They provide the knowledge for their family members, not only elders and family members. And this is the how to say that small if butterfly effect. And if they at least one members of the family who have a digital literacy skills, they the person will affect the family members. They will teach their grandparents and their parents and children's. You will use these tablets or iPhones, and they can affect the family members. I think that was the great experience in Mongolia, and so I would like to add the mention. I would like to add the you asked that question was. What was the unique in Northeast Asia compared to the other region? And in Northeast Asia, our region, we have a lot of historical conflicts, and compared to the other region, so supplying or implementing digital literacy program, we need to consider this regional unique context and historical, for example, Korean Peninsula, and yes, regional political issues. We need to consider that. Yeah.
Jerry, you mentioned the Chinese experience of payment. Actually, I moved to China in 2022. It was still the zero COVID strategy in China, and I also had to learn extremely quickly how to use the digital payment as the others, and it was actually very interesting to see how older generation is using phones to pay, and I was extremely surprised that I cannot survive with cash or with a credit card in China. So I had to learn very, very quickly to buy my dinner in China. Thank you for your comments. Since I'm representing the DPA, United Nations, I was wondering what is the role of the United Nations in digital literacy?
Fantastic question. And yes, so part of my presentation, our presentation, really gave credit to the humble beginnings of this project, and which was led by the UN professional staff giving us a platform to conduct the scale of the digital surveys that we did. So the scale of the digital dialogues and digital surveys was reached out to UN contacts within the region, and so we relied on the UN in that front to have that breadth and width. And for further contributions, and this was sprinkled throughout our slides as well, the UN runs so many programs collaborating with youth-led initiatives on the ground, and also existing nonprofits, and furthering those goals as well. I think for our specific project, because of the regional specific nature of it as well, the UN has been really helpful in giving us the expertise and to work with existing professionals to hone in on what we mean when we have these lofty goals. So just to give a specific example, so I've talked a lot about defining terms like bottom up. And I can speak to a little bit, and this was a lot of credit to some of the UN staff in engaging in specific methodologies. So it's a growing methodology where we take citizenship for an example. We know what citizenship means from our respective nations, and then when we come to terms like identity or what it means to be part of this Northeast Asia region, like regional identity, there are some floating concepts around, but each and every one of us probably has a different way to talk about it, even if there are similarities within them. And as we discuss our identities online, and we discuss these terms, a lot of these terms that we thought that were preset or had some sort of like existing boundary, a lot of that changes. So we begin to think of each other and ourselves in different ways because we're seeing about how others view us and how we view others as well. And when we slowly bridge that into the diplomatic space, and we can take regional citizenship and regional identity as an example, we're understanding what that even means and what that can mean. And a lot of that definition is coming then from us, bottom up, instead of defined by existing professionals at the very top and told and educated to us from school or whatnot what that means. And when it comes from the bottom up, that type of methodology, we're greatly thankful for that process because it's the UN's role here then is to introduce us to this approach so that we can engage in that process so that our product is still youth-led and still people-led from the bottom. So I know that's a really circuitous way to give acknowledgement to the UN in this regard, but we're again very grateful. And so this was just a small snapshot of the theoretics behind the work. And we understand that we don't have enough time to fully present on all of the policy proposals and the background, but that was a little snapshot.
Are you good?
During this our project, we organized and participated in a series of virtual meetings. And for example, last month we had meeting with Mr. Amandiv, who is the UN envoy of technology, and he shared us to UN priorities and standards, and that was quite interesting for us. And actually, in this project, in the beyond, the UN provides the unique methodology that was quite helpful for us, which is called Futures Triangle and Strategy Foresight. That was quite interesting for youths and in also regional area to consider the issues and take it into account regional and urban areas. And so I suppose that UN helps the standard and the methodology to consider the issues and in the regional and global area.
Is there any other additional questions from the audience? Okay, maybe from our participants to the audience. No. In that case, we'll be closing slowly the sessions. I would like to thank our participants, Yuka and Jerry, for your presentation. It was very insightful, and we learned a lot from this session. Thank you very much for the audience, for your patience, for your questions, and I hope that this was also useful for you. And of course, to the organizer of the Jeju Forum, thank you for giving us this platform.